Welcome to the Thoughtful Software Podcast. On this show, your hosts, Fahad and Andrew, discuss emerging technologies, interview industry experts, and share their insights on how to build incredible software. Ultimately, thoughtful software is all about helping people be better at what they do. We believe thoughtful people and thoughtful software can change the world for the better. Join our Insights newsletter at skiplist.com to be the first to receive our latest podcasts and in-house articles. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Today, we're breaking away from our typical Thoughtful Software podcast format and going a little more technical. Experts in the tech industry, Andrew and Fahad, have compiled 10 reasons as to why software projects fail. This is a huge issue because software projects are costly and have a high failure rate. Here at Skiplist, we value a thoughtful perspective to building software for our clients and focus on the positive impact thoughtfully built software can bring on society. We hope you enjoyed this episode, so let's go through 10 reasons why software projects fail.
All right, Andrew. So today we're going to talk about the top 10 reasons why software projects fail. And I don't know why it took us so long to do this episode, because I think this is one of the major premises behind the podcast itself and Skiplist in being able to help the industry, build better software. So I'm going to just kind of do the top 10 and we'll go through them one by one and we'll just have a discussion around it, if that seems good to you.
Let's do it.
Well, okay, so number 10, well, this is not any particular order. I think there's could be 100 of them why software projects fail. So this is not the list. This is not a this is the number one reason why. It's a list. So hope people don't shower with this should be in there, that should be in there. I'm sure this is definitely not an exhaustive list.
Oh God, no. I mean, number 11, just so you guys know, was Fahad, and so we're gonna leave number 11 off when we're gonna start at 10.
I could be 11 through 15.
At least.
So I wrote down number 10. So let's talk about it. Well, for number one thing, the reason this podcast and Skiplist is in existence is there's a lot of alarming statistics around how many software projects fail. One of the things that we talk about is 70% of executives admit projects are doomed from the start. I mean, we'll touch on that, but that's ridiculous. There's such an absurd high project failure rate. I think we've seen statistics around like 68%. That's insane. And this translates into like $75 billion just in the US in like reworked and abandoned software projects. So let's just talk about the industry in itself. Like all these projects failing, I mean, this translates to, I don't know how many trillions in lost value. So just talk about that, for example, like for a minute.
I mean, at the end of the day, let's not look at the monetary value. I never want to look at the monetary value. Yes, it's probably much higher than 70 billion, to be frank. Because if you're looking at, that's just lost spent dollars, but opportunity costs for businesses, and then other innovations that could have been piled in innovation. Innovation isn't just one thing. Innovation tends to happen in a chain. You invent a processor, then you can put it on a board, and then you can create a computer, right? And a computer's made up of thousands of small innovations. I like to look at the societal value lost on these projects, right? The medical devices that don't ship, the energy efficiencies that don't ship, the food innovations that don't ship, right? It's things that could transform the way humans live, transform the way we interact, transform the way we experience life. They don't ship because projects fail. And it's tragic and it's sad. I mean, you think of the human suffering that still occurs because the software industry can't get its head out of its ass, right? It's terrible.
Yeah, it's a big problem. So let's go through the list here that we've come up with. So number 10 we came up with is an absence of a good PM, a product manager, a project manager. Why does that contribute to project failure?
I mean, software projects are intricate. There's a lot of moving pieces, whether it's people, it's communication, it's logistics, shipping. or rolling out to users, it's hard. And everyone has a role to play. And if there's no project manager or there's no good project manager, things slip through the cracks. People ship features that never get announced and users never adopt. Software is built the wrong way because module A was supposed to be built before module B, but module B got built first because the project planning was poor or non-existent. The value of a good product owner, product manager is invaluable on projects. And yet, in the vast hubris of software development, most developers believe that they're just business people. But we're all in the business of something. And without a project manager, there's no one there to coordinate that business value, communicate it, ensure everything is working in a seamless way.
And I think this also contributes to some of the other reasons why projects fail, like unrealistic expectations and poor communications, mismatch of like requirements. And a good PM really understands how to manage client expectations and personalities. There's a lot of politics on both sides. They're kind of like the glue between engineering, sales, marketing, clients. And I think when you do get a good PM, they're really able to navigate a lot of these things, unexpected issues that come up. And I mean, software, it's not a logical step-by-step process as much as people want it to be. It's not going to happen. It's an organism that breathes and lives and has issues. And I think a good PM is really, really essential.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think one of the trends that kind of made this a thing, before you wouldn't start a project without a project manager, but I think the advent of DevOps and the removal of operations as a core role on a software team, it kind of got people thinking, well, we have all this tooling and automation around project management. Cards can give alerts and we have notifications, and that will help communication. But it didn't. And it's not the level DevOps. DevOps is computer talking to computer, and that works really well because it's an exact, prescriptive, or declarative way of communication. Human communication is a lot more subtle, and making sure you get the features right and having someone that can get in there and make sure that you write it once and get it right, and you're working with key stakeholders and driving in the right way and not just a way, it's invaluable. And I think once companies see all these failures, I think we're going to see a big resurgence of good project managers. And again, that's not people that are PMP or whatever certification. That's people that understand human interaction, that are deeply technical, and love gluing everything together and being that cohesive unit that moves projects forward.
Where do you think good PMs come from? Like, how do you become a good PM? And do you think developers might have a future, as a hybrid role?
I've seen good PMs come from a lot of sources. A lot of times I see them come from software engineers that are burnt out building software and they become PMs. And I've seen good ones come from that. I've seen good PMs come from people that were like business analysts on teams that then wanted to manage the teams. I've seen them come from people that were like QA testers that now they still deeply technical. I don't know how you get around that deep technical expertise because you need to be able to communicate at that level to be that cog and to be that glue. So it usually comes from a technical background of some sort, whether that's design, QA, engineering. One of those that have worked on software projects that have been around the technical complexities required to ship a project. And usually as well, they tend to also been like the leader on their part. They've been the one communicating to the business, to the salespeople, to marketing, to the management structure at the company they're working at. And so it's really someone that's kind of been in a hybrid role their entire life, or career rather.
Yeah, I think if I could think of an analogy, I would describe a PM as maybe like a Draymond Green from the Warriors, like that glue guy that's keeping the team together, and somebody you really need to create a championship team. You need that guy.
As long as you don't go around kicking people in the nuts, I'm all good with that.
Whatever
analogy.
it takes. Whatever it
takes. Of course, a Warriors fan would say that. Whatever it takes.
Just don't be salty. That's all right, man.
No, I'm super salty, man. I don't have a team anymore.
All right. So do you think developers have a future as if you're like removing DevOps from some of the things that they have to do? I think it would be very helpful for developers to understand what a product and a project role does. I mean, that could be very helpful in how, you know, how projects succeed or whether they succeed or not.
I think that yes, absolutely. Developers need technical people have to learn how to work with other people. One of the common problems in our industry is the deeply technical people, they're a little arrogant, right? I'm a little arrogant. I'm fine saying that, right? I think I know everything because I'm so good at figuring things out. I feel like I can just do marketing or sales. And that's such a flawed way of looking at the world because those skills are important and they're hard. But I think the smarter someone is, and engineering is filled with really smart people, they tend to assume that they could do that silly PM job, not seeing the complexities of human interaction and how hard knowing how to communicate something is, knowing the stakeholders and knowing what stake they hold and how hard they're going to hold it. Those kind of intricacies in communication are sometimes lost on deeply technical people, especially a lot of engineers I know and a lot of the best engineers. And so I think there are some great developers that have turned into great PMs, but in the whole, I think this industry could do better teaching engineers how to understand the value of business, not just saying, "Oh, it's terrible," or "It's easy, I could do it." It's for people not as smart as me. Seeing the value in it, and working hard to make sure that that person can do their job well. Because they do their job well, you're going to be able to do your job well.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Let's move on to the next one. Unrealistic or setting unrealistic expectations. And I think this happens in almost every project where you have a desire to ship something or build something, but there's just certain things that you may not have thought of, or you just have this grand idea, like we're going to build this blockchain AI machine learning thing, and it could be like schedules, could be the budget, but just unrealistic expectations. What do you think about that one?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I do this too, right? It's the classic overcommittal. I think everybody wants to be of service. Everyone wants to be a winner. Everyone wants to ship. And ultimately, we're societal creatures, right? Like we want to make sure our tribe loves us. And so we commit to things we shouldn't. And so we give people dates that we shouldn't. And maybe those dates are achievable in a vacuum, right? Oftentimes, what I see is people considering only one part of the project. So they'll say, "Oh, I could do this in 4 hours." Well, yeah, you can code in 4 hours, but can you talk to the person down the hall and get their approval? Can you talk to internal comms and get their approval? Can you talk to the 4 or 5 users that are going to be most affected? Can you do all those things in 4 hours? And the answer is always no. And so it's important to look at not just technical time, but the communication time and the burden of rolling things out. And a lot of times that'll help align expectations better. But most 9 out of 10 times misaligned expectations come from misscope and missed activities in the whole giving people dates and levels of effort and all of that.
Doesn't it also fall on the client? If they want something built in 8 weeks, and they're actually coming to you to build some project, it means that they don't have the expertise in house, and they may not be software people. So isn't it up to kind of us and the clients to work together and set expectations properly and say, well, to ship something of this like computer vision, which is cutting edge technology, it's not realistic to do this in 8 weeks. It's going to take 12 weeks. How do we balance that out? How do we figure that out?
I mean, I think there's a couple things. I think there are a lot of people in the world that are untrustworthy, and they've, convinced people of things that just simply aren't true. And when that happens, you get misaligned expectations. Some guy said something to the person that's the key stakeholder of that project that it can be done in 8 weeks, and they want to believe that. Everyone wants to believe what they can. Their friends. Everyone wants to believe that they can do what they say, especially if it fits their world narrative, right? Like if you thought, "Man, I only have $100,000 if I need this computer vision thing," it's going to fit your narrative that this thing's going to cost 100,000 in 8 weeks of work, and you want it to work, right? So I think that's false. Just a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of people spewing, quite frankly, bullshit. And I think the second thing that customers want to believe is they have deadlines and timelines too. Their bosses are pressuring them to say, hey, I want this by the end of the year. They've had competing priorities all year. It's October. If I don't get it done in 8 weeks, I can't get it done by the end of the year. My boss is going to be mad at me. I'm not going to get that promotion I want. I'm not going to get more money. So people's jobs and livelihoods are on the line, and they're trying to set expectations because in their the deepest, darkest parts of their soul, they want this to succeed. And sometimes the world narrative that you want to exist doesn't exist. But I think that's where a lot of expectations from the clients come from. I mean, missed expectations and lies, and the other one is pressure from the people around you, your peers and your managers.
So this idea of like, let's say I come to you and I want to build Facebook. How can you like set the expectation that this could be built within 10 months or 12 months? And I think it's one of the things I find troubling about the software industry. It's almost like the software industry is now a menu, like a la carte. We've have clients who do that. So give us your like menu rate, or this was I can order this in this many weeks. You have like calculators out there, and I just think fundamentally software is never going to be built like that. There's just too many things out there for you to say just order things off the shelf. And I think that's where it starts, where your expectation is that it's so well understood, but no matter what you do, it's always going to be different.
The problem is a lot of people don't really understand this. So let's go back, maybe even the dawn of the internet. I have a kitchen configurator, right? I'm able to go in there and say, oh, I want a kitchen. I want marble countertops. I want bamboo cabinets, whatever, right? That's easy. There's only so many things that can go into a kitchen. But unfortunately, to make that analogous, if the software is your house, you need a configurator for authentication. So what, you want OpenID? No one knows what the fuck OpenID is, right? And that's by the way, that's Google Auth, that's Facebook Auth. So maybe I put that and make you click Google Auth and Facebook Auth. But then I get so specific. Do you want Active Directory integration? Half the people in business don't know Active Directory is. So maybe you pull your IT person in, so they're helping you in your authentication configurator. Oh, well, now we need to talk about NetSuite integration. So I need to pull my accounting person in, and what things from this menu do we need? And it's so intricate at every level that configurator, to your point, would just never work. It's a silly idea because it's like, imagine writing a configurator for every possible configuration for a room in a house, right? You wouldn't do it. You see kitchen configurators because there's only so many things that can go in a kitchen, and it's pretty finite. But you don't see configure any room in your house with anything you want, because holy hell, what do you know I want in my room? Do I want a theater room? Do I want a gym? Do I want a kitchen? Do I want a bathroom? Do I want a living room? Do I want a den? Right? I can go on for hours and types of rooms people have in their house, and the software would be complex, and you couldn't do it. Too many people, too many stakeholders. And so I think the problem though is a lot of people don't understand that complexity. They don't see the amount of things that can be in software. The options are in front of us because you truly can do anything, right? We're not really bound by anything except time, and therefore resources and money. And so build me Facebook in 10 months. Great. I can build you something in 10 months. I can build something that resembles Facebook in 10 months. But are you going to get a gaming platform that has $1 billion gaming company on it, aka Zynga? No, you're not going to have that. I can't do that for you in 10 months. But can I build you a feed with comments and a login system and a button that can be used elsewhere with an OpenID system and some private messaging and maybe an app platform on top of that and an API? Yeah, I could do that in 10 months pretty easily. And so it really comes down to, what do you mean when you say Facebook, and really getting down to the details and breaking it down to the simplest parts, and then building it back up and saying, okay, you say Facebook, what does Facebook mean to you, right? And really understanding that.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point too. And I think whenever people are shopping for software, if you're looking at something that's off the shelf and you can just glue it together, I would say that it makes you kind of like everyone else because everyone else can do that. When you really look at software, you should be looking at competitive advantages. And when
Mm-hmm.
that is part of the equation, it just breeds complexity. It requires an understanding of the business, of the economic mindset. It just requires you to understand so many things that you just can't say it's going to be done in 8 weeks. And so that's why I think giving some sort of range, which is kind of in line with what you think based on your experience, this is what may happen, is probably a better way to go about it than just saying, here's, 8 weeks and this amount. And I think people should be a little bit more flexible to that idea.
Oh yeah, people need to be. It's a difference between how corporate buys things today and how software works, right? Procurements used to, we'll give this flat amount for X servers and software off the shelf, and that's how much it'll cost. And custom software doesn't work that way. It never did. And so people just have to adapt, and they will. People always do. It just take them longer than we want them to.
Yeah, so then let's talk about one of the other major reasons projects fail is around like creating a fixed SOW way in the beginning. Like, this is what we're going to build, and this is it. Now, imagine I tell you to build something that looks like Facebook or LinkedIn today. There's really, I don't think you could even plan on what they were able to accomplish, right? Or a project. Let's just maybe go simpler. Like, you want to do something around inventory management. um, it should be more iterative. So I think there's a lot of like fixed contracts, and there should be some more opportunities to like introduce, changes and kind of go with the flow, uh, to help, projects succeed a little bit better.
I mean, this is one of my biggest sticking points. I think SOWs are lies the minute we sign them. I think you can and you will end up doing the right thing. Most people do, and when they ship and they're successful with it. But sticking strictly to an SOW with changing market conditions, changing business conditions, changing business requirements, I think it's a fool's game. That's why we try not to do it necessarily here. We try to be a little more flexible with our users. We don't need time and material either. We do want to do fixed bid, but we kind of want to be flexible with our customers. And so we always add flexibility clauses. We try to work with our customers in the way they want to be worked with. Um, Change orders and things are timely or time intensive, costly, and otherwise just not, they're prohibitive to having a good relationship. And so if you're going to value relationships over the actual money, I think you look at it and you say, is it really going to hurt you to change that string on that screen over there to say what they want to say log in instead of sign in? No, it's not going to kill you. Go do it. It's going to take a second, right? Do we need a change order for that? God, no. And if you do, imagine how long your project's going to take. And so flexibility is important, and it's how projects succeed. It's actually the two-way projects succeed is extreme rigidity. We're going to do exactly what I said, exactly when I said I was going to do it. We ain't changing nothing. This is how we're going to do it. You will succeed with that model. I promise you. Everybody's going to hate it, but you will succeed with that model. And the only other way to succeed is with flexibility, because anything in the middle where you're rigid on some things and flexible on others is going to lead to mismatched
Yeah,
expectations.
I think that's interesting. And I think that brings me to the next reason is around poor communication. So I think when you're kind of working out a project and moving through milestones and sprints, and if there are things that come up, it really comes back to how well do you communicate? How well are your relationships with your client or with the product manager? This could be not just necessarily an outsourced project, but internal as well. And it's really important to be able to have those conversations and say, hey, look, this is something that we learned from, user reviews and user responses. This is, I think, where we should make adjustments. How do you think people can improve communication?
So one thing that we're working with on customers that I'm account managing is what I call a domain specific language. And so one thing that helps communication and one thing that hurts communication is not having shared vocabulary. So when I say the word data model, in some customers' vernacular, that means building a statistical model around data. And in other customers' vernaculars, that means some sort of object that describes some real world object. Maybe I have a box data model and that has a length, width, and a height. Whereas the other customer would be some sort of Gaussian distribution or curve on a particular set of boxes, right? And so having shared communication, shared vocabulary allows you to communicate in an effective way. And so you have to define that up front. When we say this word, what do we mean? So we're able to speak using our lingo, but we're not confusing each other. I think that's first key to effective communication on projects. I think the second effective key to communication is rapport. People have to trust what you're saying in the general, right? Sometimes I verify, like that number seems silly. I look it up and the person was wrong. Fine. But in general, do I trust what everyone else in this group is saying? And if I don't, I need to remedy that, right? There needs to be trust in communication and there needs to be rapport. And you build rapport over time through consistently doing what you said you were going to do and all of that. I think the form of communication that's extremely critical is consistency, right? The more we communicate, the better we are at it. The more likely we are to notice when we're not saying the same things. The more likely we are to notice that the other person is communicating in a way that you don't understand. And so just having more frequent communication, even if it's just emails or messages in a Slack somewhere, it helps people understand each other better. It does the second thing, which is rapport, but it also helps us notice breakdowns in our communication.
Yeah, I think it's important to be honest than silent, right? And just keep discussing, communicating. And I think people tend to sometimes be afraid of, oh, if there's an issue or if there's a discussion. And I think generally on the client side, they would appreciate some of the conversations. And, this is a, moving target. This is a complicated project, and let's just keep communicating and talking about it. And I think if you continually do that, like you said, it will definitely help.
I find, because I'm a super confident guy, and so I always say stuff like, oh, I got this. And 90% of the time I do, and 10% of the time I don't. So it's a good hedge, but it's also uh, not always the right thing to do. And so what I find is I tend to do better when this project is red and I cut it early and I say, you know what, confidence is going to do this. I need to elevate this, and elevating early and honestly and saying, hey, this project's red right now, guys. I'm sorry. This is what's going wrong. Can you help me? 98% of the time, the customers will help you. They want their project to succeed. They would not be paying you money, and trust me, just to throw it out the window. They can literally throw their money out the window and waste it just as effectively as paying you. They will help you. And if you elevate quickly, people can get you the assistance you need. There might be no assistance what you need. It could just be a time issue. We underallocated resources. We're gonna have to work extra hard to get this done. We're working extra hard. But then people appreciate that honesty. It builds trust and it builds rapport. And also it gets help when you need it.
You can be one of the first to download our podcast and read our latest articles each week by subscribing to the Thoughtful Software newsletter. Sign up today and receive a free copy of Andrew's ebook, Thoughtful Software Principles. This is a treasure trove of software wisdom you won't find anywhere else. In this free resource, Andrew dives into details on how to build really great software. You can go to skiplist.com to subscribe and we'll immediately send you a download link. That's skiplist.com. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, I like that one. So let's talk about another one that I think is a big part of what we do is a major reason projects fail is a lack of talented engineers. So explain to me why that's such a huge issue. I mean, I understand maybe if there's a complex technology, but just in general, uh, why is that such a big issue?
The worse your engineers are and the longer your timeline is, the more likely they are to build something that's unmaintainable and not working. Even if you have good talent, it's possible that you push your good talent to do the wrong thing. So without good leadership or project management, you can also run into this. And I think we talked about project manager and why that's so important, but here's another reason, right? If you don't manage your good engineers well, and you give them 2 days notice to do anything, you have piss poor planning and all that, you're going to build a shit code base because there's no way to factor the code in a way that's cohesive if you don't know what the future holds. So even with good engineers, there's no guarantee you're going to build anything good. You need good engineers plus good leadership from a project management perspective. And so the flip side is that talented engineers know how to think through problems. They know how to factor code. They know how to refactor code and continue to build evolvable code bases. They know how to use technology to their advantage. They know how to leverage off the shelf technology to save time and money. They know all these techniques. They know how to automate. Those people are not common. They're talented people. They have deep expertise in a field, right? How many great doctors are there? Very few, right? We hear about them all the time. It's the same thing with engineers. And so having those people will 10x your project. It's so important that you have people. You can't just go out and find someone for $100 an hour and think, oh, they're great because they're charging $100 an hour. I was charging $100 an hour when I was 18, right? 18 years old. So was I good? I don't know. I talked a big game, right? I'm nowhere near as good as I am now. And so the point is, there are a lot of people out there charging a lot of money, but where are the talent and how do you know that talent? How do you vet them to have those skill sets? That's difficult too. I think at the end of the day, having those skills in your team make you incredibly valuable and also make the project more likely to succeed because you have better code bases, because you have people thinking through the project more, next step, not just the current step and all of that.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things here, right? Like, so let's take the first scenario. If you are a CIO or CTO or even a director of engineering in a big company and you have resources, you have engineers to build out a project. And you see this a lot where companies will decide whether they want to use internal engineers or outsource. And they go, well, all I have to do is shift some money around internally and I can use my internal team. What are the dangers or what are some of the issues with just taking that straight approach?
So I think internal teams are great. They tend to have deep expertise in their field. When I was working at a financial services company, there were people that have been there 25 years. They knew how banking worked at a level that most people don't. And they knew about how it worked and how it evolved throughout the years. And they had very good domain expertise. I could also code circles around them, and they were literally at one point triple my age, right? So get that your head around that, right? So it was, of course, they were good and had domain knowledge, but they couldn't necessarily build it. And so the risk you run into is you don't build modern solutions with old skills. And so you have an age skill set, you have people close to retirement in some cases, but even if you have young internal resources, they might be split across multiple projects. Their focus might not be on there. So you have a lack of skills and modern skills that might be applicable to your project. The other thing you run into is what I call basically we've always done it here syndrome, right? And it's like, oh, we only use Apache. Why? Because we've always done it that way here, right? And you build the same thing over and over again, and you wonder why you can't innovate. And so you really hurt yourself in innovation because you don't have perspective, and perspective matters, right? You can send your people to a billion conferences, and they still don't necessarily get perspective unless they worked in other places that have implemented and seen the pitfalls, right? You can go read a book about Kubernetes, but until Kubernetes goes down and it's 1 a.m. and you're on a project that's supporting hospitals and you need to get that thing back up, you don't quite have the perspective on Kubernetes that I do, right? And so it helps you really understand what's needed, what isn't needed, and really innovate, knowing the constraints of the technology you're going to adopt. That's your biggest risk. I mean, those two things alone can kill a project.
Well, so on the flip side is, let's say you do recognize that and now you want to outsource. I'm actually looking at a webpage on Wikipedia that says a list of failed projects, and some of them are in the billions. Um, and
That's
and so
exciting.
and one of the and if you look at whether it was internal or outsourced, I mean, it looks all outsourced. And so
Hmm.
now I'm pretty sure it's a lot of these big companies, overseas talent, like, so I think you hit on it. How do you find the great engineers that are internal, and how do you find them, just going outside your company? Like, this just seems like a really challenging problem.
So the worst kept secret is all the good people know each other. And why do we all know each other? Well, we've all worked together at some point, and we've all been referred to each other from other people, and we network ourselves, right? Because we all understand and value each other's expertise. And so, how do you find good people? You find the person that knows all the good people, and you hire that person. On the other side of it, though, is it's internal people aren't necessarily bad. If you fully outsource every project and you have no internal people on it, oh boy, you're going to fail just as hard almost, right? And internal here can be weird. You don't have to have internal engineers, but you need stakeholders that understand your business. Do you think I understand how theme parks work, Fahad? I do now. Did I? Hell no, I didn't. Right. But I was able to work with the people that were internally, ask them key questions that helped me understand the domain and leverage their expertise and my technical expertise and merge them together to build technical solutions in that space. And so you need internal people to help drive those solutions, right, that have those expertise. If not, then are you working towards a business case, or are you just building technology to build technology? And anytime you're building technology to build technology, you're going to fail. It's bound to happen.
But I mean, there's also a fundamental shortage of engineers, isn't there? I mean, there's just not enough software engineers out there. That's probably
Um,
contributing to a lot of the lack of talent, wouldn't it?
people say that. I'm not sure if that's true or not. I personally, have I ever had a problem hiring people? No, I haven't. Why? People want to work with me. Do I have a shortage of engineers? I don't. But do other people? I think they do. And I think that's, you want to pay someone 50% less than they would in Silicon Valley. They get to wear a suit every day to work, and they don't get free lunches or beanbag chairs, and they have to pay for the medical care. No, I'm going to work for that startup over there that gives me all those things. And you don't, now you have a shortage of talent. So I don't know if there's a shortage of talent or a shortage of talent people can hire and willing to tolerate the old practices and the conservative sectors of the economy that need this technology, but can't get talent to do it. However, if I thought everyone had the same pay scales and everyone was working the same way with the same similar benefits, and people were lacking the ability to hire, I would probably say you're right. And mathematically, you're right. I just think the industry has some adjustment to do, given how fast Silicon Valley has moved and how it treats engineers versus the rest of the sectors in the economy.
Yeah, it just seems like here in Silicon Valley, companies are just trading engineers. They're going from one
Well,
Facebook to Google, and they just keep rotating.
there is a shortage of top talent. People that are really good are hard to come by. Like I said, the people that are really good, yeah, I get 14 job offers a day in my mailbox, probably, right? Of places I could go work. And I can walk away tomorrow and make probably a little more than I'm making here at Skiplist. Obviously, I'm going to make a
Yeah,
lot
let's
more
not
when
do
we're
that.
I'm not walking away, just to be clear, but some of these job offers are actually absurd, right? They're absurd. And so, you go to Google and they're paying you 230, and you go to Facebook, they're paying you 280 now. And you're like, why do they switch jobs? Like 50,000 more plus 200,000 in stock options and $100,000 signing bonus. And why did the guy leave? Man, right? Like, don't ask yourself dumb questions. And then Netflix the next day offers him 300, right? It's why people jump jobs so much. I think eventually this will all calm down, but top talent's hard to find, and top talent is critical in succeeding in your product vision.
Hmm, that's interesting. Let's move on to the next one. This is more around, I think, companies working with, uh, outsourced companies and development companies, consulting agencies around like misaligned goals. So a lot of consulting companies want to like bill hours, And so one side wants to bill as many hours as possible, the other side wants you to bill less, and they want it in a certain time frame. And so misalignment causes a lot of issues. So talk about how we can kind of fix that and how much of an issue that is.
Yeah, I think we talk about values here at Skiplist a lot. One of our values is relationships over money. We value the relationships over the money that we make. We make good money, but at the end of the day, we like our customers a lot. And when you do that, the game kind of changes a little bit. You start acting a little differently. You stop being as selfish, right? I remember working actually just recently, yesterday even, I was working with a customer that is a good friend of mine, and he's a support guy working 25 hours a week max. And he hit his limit because they're going through a bad support case. Their architecture is not very good. I'm helping him work through that. And the support guy emails him, and it's basically just being an extortionist. He's a contractor through a major company, and I won't say which. And he's like, "Well, my rate's so and so, but if you double it, I'll work 15 more hours this week." Knowing that my friend didn't have a choice, he's not going to let his customer sit there and suffer. And so he had to pay double his rate. The thing cost him an arm and a leg. He doesn't have a lot of money to begin with. He's a startup. And it just goes to remind you that these firms aren't looking out for you. They have a P&L, they have divisions that need to make money, and they're publicly traded. And at the end of the day, their CEO don't care about your project, they care about the money. That's what they're being measured against. That's what the public's measuring their success against. That's what their partners are measuring you against. And so when you think about it, how do you align yourself with your customers' expectations? You start talking and measuring yourself against metrics like net promoter score, customer success metrics, employee success metrics. And when you start doing that and you start talking about success from the perspective of the stakeholders involved instead of the money, you'll naturally make money because you'll be successful, but you'll also have better results. And I think that that's key in changing the paradigm of money first. You need money to operate a business. There's no doubt in my mind. Anyone tells you doesn't understand business at all or life. And they're not going to be in business very long. But as soon as the money figures itself out and you're set, don't measure it anymore. Go after the things that matter.
Yeah, I would say that's why we don't bill by the hour, because it's just really difficult to keep that tracked. I mean, just nobody wants to do that. And it doesn't incentivize, outcomes. If you need to take long, you can just go ahead and take long and, just charge the client. But that doesn't feel good. So I think it's a good point. Focus on outcomes. Maybe I think like a weekly stand up or weekly outcome, something like that is a lot more effective than just kind of tracking hours. So let's go to the next one. One of the other major reasons projects fail is because of team consistency. And a lot of companies are looking at freelancers and freelance networks to, leverage, some of these complex projects. And, you and I have experience with some of these platforms, and it's really difficult to keep freelancers or even just your internal teams together for a long time. So how do you solve that issue?
Yeah, it's really difficult. The consistency thing it plagues everybody. As you mentioned, people are switching companies like mad. Offers are going out. It's hard to retain people. Loyalty is not really a thing anymore in the tech industry. And so, how do you retain consistency? And one of the reasons that you go with a firm that understands this is because they know how to mitigate it. And so, one approach is to use freelancers and to supplement those with full-time people. And those full-time people become your anchors. And they're around a long time. They get stock options with the company. They have a vested interest in the upside of the business, and they stay around longer. And then on the 1099s, you get access to a lot of talent that otherwise, you could hire, but maybe you couldn't. And sometimes freelancers just really like being freelancers. And that's one way. I think another way is a culture of documentation and a culture of writing things down and being very, very communicative of the things that you're doing. And if you're doing that, you're able to share that documentation. People pick things up quickly. And that comes with automation as well. You want to automate things as much as you can so people don't have to learn a lot. These are all lessons you learn when you think about continuity. And the third thing is get rid of toxic people. I mean, if you have toxic people on your team, they're going to drive everyone else away quicker than anything else. And so what you really need is people that, want to work with the clients. They really want and to be on this project. And if they don't, then you really have to move quickly. And if you do those three things, you have a really great continuity model and you'll be able to succeed. Most businesses do not have a good continuity model. In fact, a lot of the larger businesses are understaffed when it comes to hard tech people, and they're working on 15 projects. So they're not documenting anything, and they might be off your project at any given moment. So they don't have enough talent. And at the freelancing, they're not documenting things. They don't have an internal repository because it's just a freelancer network. It's just basically triage of projects. So there's no practices around that. And so at the end of the day, you're left with, what do you do? Well, I think the way Skiplist handles it, it's very mature. And I think, we're going to find new and better ways to handle it as, we try to be more consistent. We have longer and longer projects.
Yeah, that's why it goes back to our first point. Having a good PM, even on both sides, is really, really important.
Oh, yeah,
have
absolutely.
that one consistent person who can help engineers get onboarded, just kind of keep the project moving. So that's really important. Let's move to one other one that I don't know if this makes a top 10, but it's definitely one of the things that we looked at as we were building Skiplist was projects tend to start really slow. So you've had an idea, you've put together some requirements, and for some awful reason, it takes 6 months to go through legal, to spin up a team, to put things together and get that going. And I think we found a way to make sure on our end that at least the legal part is done quickly. We can turn around SOWs quite quickly and proposals and contracts. But why is fundamentally this a big problem? Why are so many companies just so slow to get all these things done?
For any project, one of the biggest key factors isn't velocity, it's momentum. A lot of people think, oh, as long as things are moving quickly, things will get done. But that's not true. When things run out of momentum, velocity will drop off almost instantaneously, right? When I need to communicate to someone, if they're not excited, they take 2 days to get back to me. They're excited, they take a day, right? All those delays add up. And so when you're on a 1-year project and 6 months is eaten by legal, not only are you drastically behind schedule, you're now already fighting a loss of momentum. People aren't interested anymore. It was interesting 6 months ago, but now my day job's caught up to me. I'm behind for the year. I don't really have time to manage this. I can't be a part of this project, all of that, right? And so then it's really hard to succeed when there's no momentum. And so you end up trudging through it. I think it's so important that you keep things exciting and you break things apart so they're not as big. And there's activities you can do up front and have an agreement with the business and say, hey, if we're going to get paid as soon as the deposit's there, but can we do a kickoff already? Can we come down and speak to you? Can you fill out this workbook while we're waiting? Things like that to keep people engaged. You keep people engaged, you'll keep people happy, and you'll keep the project moving along. And that's critical for project success.
Yeah, okay, that's great because it segues into our next point, is around a major reason why projects fail is clients and people just don't do a lot of discovery. So let's say you do have the requirements, there's always so many unknowns, and it's always a challenge to spend that first week or 2 weeks or even a separate session just trying to detail some of the requirements. Even then, it's difficult to know everything until you actually get into the project. So why do so many people resist a discovery or some sort of scoping session before a project begins?
they feel it's going to be expensive. They think that if we look into this beforehand, we don't just get started, we're going to set the project back. What they don't realize is that if they take more time up front to really understand the project, they'll prevent rework, they'll have deeper insight, and they'll build the right thing the first time, or most of the right thing the first time. No one's ever perfect. But most projects have so much rework in them that they take double as long. And if you just spent 3 weeks up front, you would do it. And I think it's hard. It's hard to go to every stakeholder and get time and say, hey, I want to talk to you about this project I'm doing. It's hard to gather user requirements and distill them into a cohesive vision. It's hard to look at that and look at the unknowns part of a project. It's hard to think critically across time and say this is how things would go and put together a cohesive project plan. Again, this comes back down to good project management, right? Are you sitting down with your users? Are you visioning everything before the devs even start working? Have I thought through every piece? Do I know all the functionality I need or most of the functionality to create a cohesive vision around what I'm trying to build? And that's why I ask myself before I build anything, do I have a cohesive vision? And so my rule is that if I can't communicate it to my wife and I can't pull her aside and tell her what I'm going to build, I don't build it until I can. Right? Sometimes that's really frustrating to people involved in projects with me, but I like to have a cohesive vision and say, this is how I build. And then I look at each feature individually and say, how does this fit into the vision? How does this create a cohesive experience? And then we start into UX, UI visions and communicating that to the designers and all of that. But the time spent up front is great. No good plan survives the battlefield. That's true, right? But what's also true is Patton still spend months planning every battle before he did it, right? Because without that plan, they're going to fall back to reaction. And they have no idea what that reaction is going to be. With a plan, they always have something to fall back to. And that he always had a vision. And when you have a vision, you can continue to communicate this. This is how we're going to win. This is how we're going to win. This is how we're going to win. And it keeps people motivated, to my last point, because they're still marching along this vision. And as long as we can do that, the momentum won't be lost, no matter how many roadblocks are put in front of you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. But I think also people have been burned so many times by a lot of companies who will do like a consulting gig for like 6 months, charge a couple $1 million, and all you get out of it was a PowerPoint. And you're like, well, and it costs you another million. Costs you another million just to get the PowerPoint from them, get a copy of it. And so you could probably do a lot of these scoping and discovery sessions. It takes a week or 2 weeks to, generally understand, the bigger unknowns. There's always some that are going to be out there, but I don't think it should take too long. And I think it'd be helpful in the long run.
I like to say it's a week per 3 months of the project. If you have a 6-month project, it's 2 weeks, right? Now that's not always true because you have design and stuff. So a 6-month project might even have a single month of planning, but you know exactly how you're going to execute the project and you're probably going to succeed, right? But are you patient enough to sit there and do that? Are you patient enough to sit and watch, knowing that you now have an execution plan? And if you can do that, if you can have the patience is rare these days. People are used to instant gratification, but the people that can plan and stick to a plan and stick to an execution, they win. They win every time, right? And you do that, you're going to win. I mean, your project's going to succeed.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the last one. And this is my favorite. Is I think something you should trademark. By the way, I think I'm going to trademark it, and then I'll sell it back to you. Is around earn your complexity. So talk about that. I'm just going to leave it there, and I think it's a huge, huge issue, and maybe one of the top reason why software projects fail.
It's so interesting. So many people misunderstand this. They think, oh, you're not planning, you're not thinking ahead, you're not making good architecture. That's not what this means at all. So I'm going to clear up some confusion on this point. Earn your complexity is saying, listen, I don't know if you're going to have 1,000 users. I don't know if you're going to have 1,000,000 users. I don't know if you're going to have 10 million users. But what I do know today is we have to support one user, and you have dreams of getting to 10,000 users. So we have to build the flexibility into the platform to allow you to 10,000 users, but build for one user, right? And it's hard to show constraint. Will you need this type of queuing system in your architecture? Who knows? For one user, will you need it? No, absolutely not. For 10 users, no, you will not. You can do everything in real time for the most part. And so when you look at people building in unnecessary complexity, every piece you add to your architecture is something you have to support, right? You're spending hours making sure your queuing system works, debugging your queuing system, debugging all the integrations. That takes time away from development. People want to run a lean shop, but how are you going to run a lean shop on a heavy architecture? You can't. One of the worst mistakes I see startups do, when I look at Series B, Series C startups that are failing from a technology perspective, the number one reason in 2019 is because they went to microservices. They have less than 100,000 users, they have less than 50 devs, and they moved all of their technology complexity to organizational complexity. So 25 of their developers turned into DevOps engineers, leaving only 25% 25 developers to actually support the platform. Another 15 of those are actually supporting the code, fixing bugs and things like this. So they had 10 developers developing new features for 1,000 clients. Do you know how excited their clients were? Not happy at all, because all they could do was develop new features for their enterprise clients they were trying to onboard, while their SMB clients were churning. And they barely got enterprise clients online, right? Because they couldn't absorb the operational complexity of microservices. Again, earning your complexity is looking at it and saying, where I am at today, where do I need to be in tomorrow, a month from now, a year from now, building the flexibility to get to your vision while not absorbing the complexity that you can't handle today, right? Because you won't succeed. You won't get to tomorrow if you absorb tomorrow's complexity today, right? Imagine us absorbing the payroll of $1 billion company tomorrow, Fahad. Can we do that from a financial standpoint? No, we couldn't, right? But technology people seem to think I will adopt the architecture of $1 billion company at my $100,000 startup and I'll be just fine. And you won't be. You won't be fine. You will never be fine. It doesn't work that way, right? You have to earn it. Whether you think you do or you think you don't, you're going to do it either way. And whether you've earned it or not is the real question. You're going to get complexity if you have success. I guarantee it. It's how you handle that complexity and how you move forward and how you lead your organization through that complexity. That's what defines true technology leaders. And that's just earn your complexity in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think that's such a fascinating topic. Would you describe it also as like managing your technical debt? And I think it'd be important to discuss how do you incorporate new features? Because I think just recently, a few months ago, Slack rewrote their entire desktop application, and they have a really interesting article on how they shifted from what they had from before. It was just basically just a kludge of different components from like video to voice, and now they re-architected it from the ground up, I think, essentially. So how do you kind of manage that, and trying to introduce new features without like breaking everything?
The best technology leaders understand that technical debt is a business problem. And knowing how to communicate that is how you deal with that debt, right? The CEO cares about his debt, right? The credit cards that they have out, the loans they have out, the lines of credit, for sure. But it's the same thing with technical debt. How are you communicating it? Well, I like to communicate it when I call feature velocity. Last month we shipped 5 features. This month we're on target to ship 4. Why? We have too much technical debt. It's ladening us down. It's making us too heavy. But if we resolve it, we'll ship 3 this month, but next month we'll be back to shipping 5, right? And so in the end of the day, guess what that means? That's the same as shipping 4 this month and 4 next month. But we fixed our debt, so we might ship 5 the following month, and then we actually have more features, right? And so knowing how to communicate and tie technical debt and tie these technical things back to business outcomes makes you a successful technology leader. And if you can't do that, all you're doing is the doomsday sayer screaming into the void of all my code base sucks. And the CEO's like, yeah, but fucking sales suck, dude, right? And they have their own problems. But if you tie your problems to the problems they care about, you win. And so for me, how do I handle technical debt? I tie it back to the business outcome. What business outcome am I expected to have? And what am I not achieving because of my technical debt, right? Are my developers unhappy? Well, churn is expensive, right? Recruiting is expensive. So can I tie that back to churn and say, hey, our technical debt's churning 2 developers a month, costing us $40K a month in recruiting costs. Well, that seems expensive for something we can just deal with, right? And so when you look at that, that's technical debt. How do I look at feature development? I look at it from a holistic standpoint. What does it look like in my vision for the product? What does it look like on a team level? What's the minimum thing I can do to verify this feature if it's not verified already? And second, how does it tie into the architecture as a whole? Are there other components that we can refactor to reuse a lot of our components to make this feature easier to build and make our code base more robust, more streamlined? And look at it and really think about it from a technical level and plan really well. If we do that, then we're building these primitives that we can use for other features, and we build really robust reusable components. And when you do that, again, you reduce time to market, you reduce operational complexity, and you reduce technical complexity.
I think it's really fascinating. And I mean, basically you're describing that technical debt is inevitable, right? For every project. And it really comes down to who's going to manage it the best. And so I think it's a good point for, executives, managers, engineers, even salespeople that are working out requirements to really understand that, be more strategic, understand what's happening, with the projects. Where do you want to go? I think everyone needs to be more of a visionary. It'll help kind of see where the big picture is down the road, and then just make decisions based on that. And I think it's a good point.
Think about it this way. Most people can't buy a house without taking on debt, but they're investing in their future with a stable home and a place to invest in property value gains by leveraging some of their future money now. And you're doing the same thing with technical debt. You're leveraging your technical future for your ability to grow now, your ability to ship that feature and get that enterprise client, or ship that feature and retain a client, right? You're leveraging your future, sure, right? But how long do you leverage your future, right? If you take a 19% mortgage, good luck, man, right? Like that's gonna suck, right? So you try to do it whenever it's optimal, but you don't always have that option. If the market's really terrible and you need a home, you buy it. But then here's the beautiful thing, you can refinance the 19% loan to a 5% loan. And so you really have to think about debt and technical debt as a resource that you can leverage as a technology expert to get ahead now, but know that you have to pay it down in the future or you go bankrupt, right? Just like the real world, right? You can't support it anymore. You lose customers. The thing can't stay up. I've seen every possible permutation of what can happen if technical debt gets out of hand. But for the most part, because I'm a pretty good technology leader, I always get to fix it. And so that's the point of it, is you want good technology leaders on your team to understand what technical debt is and isn't, and how to leverage that so your company can succeed.
Yeah, well, Andrew, I find this discussion fascinating. These are my favorite conversations I have with you, and I learn a ton every time. Even though I've heard you talk about this several times, there's always something new. And I think we could probably go on for maybe 100 more of these reasons projects fail, which is really unfortunate, but that's why we're here, is to help people out. And so if you have any final thoughts, let me know. But I think it was just a great discussion.
I think my final thought here is that this is not meant to be a doom or gloom kind of like podcast. It's not meant to be like, oh man, my project's going to fail. It might not, right? Like, I don't know your project. Maybe it's going well. Congratulations. I'm happy for you. Personally, this is here because I think it's important for people to know these things and act against them. Whether we're involved or not, we create a Skiplist to transform the world through thoughtful software. And we're going to do that. But at the same time, Like, we want projects to succeed, whether we're involved with them or not. Like I said, I look at the world value, and I want my kids to grow up in a world where software is awesome. And I don't feel like software is awesome right now. And until that's the case, like, Skiplist is going to be around. And I'm going to help other people succeed, even for projects that Skiplist is involved in, just because I care that deeply about your project. So even if you don't have any intention to sign with us and you're listening to this, email me if you're having project troubles. I'm happy to help you. I mean, this is about hope. This is about enumerating why things fail and taking action against these software atrocities, and doing something about it, and not doom and gloom, but being proactive and caring.
Thanks for listening. You can always connect with us at skiplist.com.